Picture this. You unlock your phone just to check something quickly. And there it is, a new message, a like, a winning notification, or that one video you were hoping would blow up. For a split second, the world around you goes a bit quieter. Your attention narrows. Your chest feels a tiny lift. Your eyes stay glued to the screen, and you feel that little internal yes. That tiny emotional spike is not random. It is your brain responding to a surge of dopamine. In that moment, your brain is not thinking in words like success, approval, or reward. It is working in chemistry. Certain brain cells buried deep in regions that evolved to help you survive suddenly fire more often than they were firing a second ago. They release more dopamine than your usual baseline, and that extra dopamine changes the way other cells behave. The result is that quick wave of motivation, focus, and a subtle desire for more. You might notice your posture changing a bit without even realizing it. Your legs lean in toward whatever triggered that feeling. Maybe you scroll a little faster, tap a little quicker, or decide to open another app. The surge does not stay at its peak for long, but while it is there, it gently pushes your decisions in a specific direction. Keep going, keep chasing, do that again. What makes all of this truly fascinating is that your brain is not just reacting to pleasure, it is updating a hidden scoreboard, learning what is worth it and what is not. That single dopamine surge is a signal, and your brain will remember it. The strange part is that sometimes the strongest surge is not when you get the reward, but when you expect it. And that twist changes everything about how habits, addictions, and motivation are built inside your mind. What was the last tiny thing that gave you that little internal yes feeling? Tell me in the comments so we can see how similar our brains are. Dopamine is often called the pleasure chemical, but that nickname is more misleading than helpful. Dopamine is actually a neurotransmitter, a chemical messenger that brain cells use to talk to each other. It helps send signals between neurons in areas that control movement, attention, learning, and yes, the way you anticipate rewards. Without dopamine, even simple things like getting out of bed, planning your day, or moving your hand to pick up a glass of water would feel strangely difficult. Instead of thinking of dopamine as pleasure juice, it's more accurate to see it as a motivation and learning signal. When dopamine surges in certain pathways, your brain essentially marks an event as important. It's as if your nervous system is saying, "Remember this matters, do this again." That is why dopamine is involved in forming habits, both helpful ones and destructive ones. Another common confusion is between dopamine and other chemicals like serotonin or endorphins. Serotonin is more related to overall mood and emotional balance, while endorphins are linked to pain relief and euphoria, especially after intense exercise. Dopamine, on the other hand, is that forward-pulling signal. It is involved in wanting, craving, and goal-directed behavior, much more than in calm satisfaction. When people misunderstand dopamine, they often chase the wrong things: constant stimulation, endless novelty, and quick hits of excitement. The problem is that your brain's dopamine system was not designed for a world of infinite scrolling and instant rewards. It was built for hunting, exploring, solving problems, and slowly earning outcomes over time. And when modern life collides with that ancient wiring, the effects on your brain can be a lot more dramatic than they look on the surface. To understand what a dopamine surge really is, imagine two brain cells facing each other, separated by a tiny gap called a synapse. One neuron is about to send a message, the other is waiting to receive it. When something meaningful happens, like a surprising reward or a predicted success, the sending neuron becomes more active. Electrical signals travel down its long branch and reach the end, where little packets filled with dopamine are stored. Those packets open and release dopamine molecules into the synapse. For a brief moment, the space between the two cells is flooded with these tiny chemical messengers. On the other side, the receiving neuron has specialized receptors waiting for them, almost like locks waiting for the right key. When dopamine binds to those receptors, it changes how likely that neuron is to fire its own signal. If enough receptors are activated, the message moves forward in the circuit. This was good. Pay attention to this. Remember this. The surge does not last forever. Very quickly, transporter proteins start removing dopamine from the synaptic gap, pulling it back into the sending neuron to be reused or broken down. Enzymes also help clear the excess. This cleanup is crucial because if dopamine stayed high constantly, your brain would lose contrast between normal and special events. The magic of the surge is not that dopamine is always high, but that it rises above your usual baseline and then comes back down. What you feel as excitement, drive, or curiosity is the psychological echo of these tiny chemical waves. In different brain regions, the same dopamine surge can mean different things. In one area, it may tweak your movement. In another, your attention. In another, your sense that something valuable just happened. When these surges are timed with rewards and predictions, they feed into one of the most powerful circuits your brain has, the reward system that teaches you what to want. Deep in your brain, there is a network often called the reward circuit. It links regions that detect important events, regions that make you feel motivated, and regions that help you plan and act. When something feels rewarding, neurons in areas like the ventral tegmental region send dopamine to regions like the nucleus accumbens and parts of your prefrontal cortex. You do not need to remember those names, but you definitely feel what they do. They make certain actions feel worth repeating. This circuit is constantly learning from patterns. If a certain action tends to lead to a positive outcome, dopamine surges at the right moments and strengthens the connections between neurons involved in that behavior. It's like your brain is quietly running experiments in the background. When I do this, do I usually get something good? Over time, the behaviors that are most consistently paired with dopamine rises become the ones that feel automatic, almost like second nature. The phrase, "just one more," is not just a joke about binge watching or endless scrolling. It's a reflection of how this circuit operates. Each small reward, each tiny uncertainty about what comes next, each little surprise can trigger another dopamine rise. Your brain is especially sensitive to variable rewards, where you don't know exactly when the good thing will happen. That unpredictability can keep your reward circuit hooked, nudging you to repeat the behavior again and again. None of this means your brain is broken. It means your reward system is doing exactly what it evolved to do: push you toward things that seem valuable and worth pursuing. The real challenge is that modern life offers an almost infinite stream of artificial rewards that hijack this circuitry more intensely and more frequently than natural experiences ever did. And when those surges start rewiring your habits day after day, the line between "I enjoy this" and "I cannot stop this" gets thinner than most people realize. People often call dopamine the pleasure chemical, but that's not really what it does. Dopamine is much more about the drive to act than the feeling of comfort afterward. When dopamine rises in key brain circuits, you feel pulled toward a goal, a behavior, or a reward, even if the pleasant part has not happened yet. That's why you can be extremely motivated to chase something you've never even experienced, simply because your brain predicts it might be valuable. Pleasure itself is handled more by other systems, including opioid pathways, that generate a sense of "this feels good right now." Dopamine spikes when there's prediction, pursuit, or surprise. It marks events as important for the future, not just enjoyable in the present. This is why sometimes the anticipation of opening a message feels stronger than actually reading it. This gap between wanting and liking explains a lot of modern behavior. You can strongly want something you no longer truly enjoy, like endlessly opening apps out of habit rather than real interest. Your dopamine system keeps responding to the possibility of a reward, even when the reward itself has faded. By the way, I'm curious, what is one thing you notice you crave more than you actually enjoy? Share it in the comments so other people recognize themselves too. Every time dopamine is released in response to something you do, it subtly changes the connections between neurons involved in that behavior. These connections, called synapses, can strengthen when they are repeatedly active around the same time as a dopamine surge. When a particular action often precedes a dopamine rise, your brain quietly tags that action as relevant and makes it easier to repeat in the future. This is the core of habit formation. Think of the loop: cue, action, reward. A notification appears, you grab your phone, you get a small social or informational reward. Over many repetitions, the cue and the action become tightly linked because dopamine keeps reinforcing that pattern. Eventually, you may skip the conscious decision phase entirely. The cue alone is enough to trigger the behavior, almost like your brain is running a script in the background. The important thing is that this mechanism is neutral. It does not care whether a habit is good for your long-term goals or not. The same dopamine-driven learning that helps you build a consistent study routine can also lock in late-night snacking or endless scrolling. The hopeful side of this is that your brain stays plastic. If you start associating dopamine with healthier actions and reduce easy rewards for unhelpful ones, those circuits can slowly be reshaped. When your brain is hit with frequent or intense dopamine surges, it starts to adapt. Neurons often respond by reducing the sensitivity or number of dopamine receptors, a process that shows up as tolerance. What used to feel exciting now feels normal, and you need more stimulation, stronger content, or bigger doses to reach the same level of internal response. Your baseline shifts, and everyday life can start to feel dull by comparison. At this point, cravings begin to play a major role. Your brain remembers how strong those earlier surges felt, even if you cannot recreate them easily anymore. You may find yourself chasing behaviors not because they bring genuine pleasure, but because not doing them feels uncomfortable. The absence of stimulation becomes its own source of stress, and you turn back to the same habits just to relieve that internal tension. In more extreme cases, especially with addictive substances or very high-intensity behaviors, this can slide into a pattern where your reward system and decision-making circuits are deeply altered. The behavior begins to feel less like a choice and more like something you are being pulled into. Understanding the role of dopamine here is not about blaming yourself. It is about realizing how a system designed to guide survival can be overdriven in an environment full of powerful artificial rewards. Dopamine is tightly linked to motivation and reward, but it also intersects with systems involved in mood and stress. When dopamine signaling is blunted in certain pathways, people can experience anhedonia, the sense that things that used to feel rewarding are now strangely flat. It's not just being lazy, it's the feeling that nothing seems worth the effort because the brain's usual signals that say, "this will be satisfying," are weaker than before. On the anxiety side, constantly chasing small, unpredictable rewards can keep your nervous system half-activated. When your brain is always expecting little hits of stimulation, but they arrive irregularly, you may feel restless, uneasy, or unable to fully relax. Dopamine circuits interact with threat detection and uncertainty processing, so a shaky reward system can feed into chronic worry and overchecking behaviors. In depression, some people show changes in dopamine-related circuits that affect drive and initiative. Tasks that used to be manageable can feel overwhelmingly heavy, and the future may look empty of meaningful rewards. Of course, mood disorders are complex and involve many factors beyond dopamine, including other brain chemicals, life events, and biology. But understanding this connection helps explain why chronic overstimulation, poor sleep, and constant artificial rewards can slowly erode mental well-being. The phrase dopamine detox sounds dramatic, but it does not match how the brain actually works. You cannot detox a neurotransmitter that your nervous system needs every single day to move, think, and stay motivated. Dopamine is not a poison you get rid of. It's a signal your brain constantly uses to mark what is important and worth pursuing. What most people mean when they say dopamine detox is really something else. Taking a break from the flood of ultra-stimulating activities that constantly trigger big dopamine responses. When you step away from highly rewarding behaviors for a while, you're not flushing dopamine out of your body. You're giving your reward circuits space to calm down and regain sensitivity. Instead of hammering them with fast, artificial rewards, you let your attention settle on slower, more natural experiences. A walk outside, a focused work session, cooking real food, reading, having an uninterrupted conversation. Over time, your brain can start to respond more strongly to these simpler rewards again, instead of only reacting to extreme stimulation. Scientific research supports the idea that reducing excessive stimulation, improving sleep, managing stress, and engaging in real-world activities can help restore more balanced dopamine signaling. What it does not support is the idea of a magical reset that happens in a single day just because you avoided screens. Your brain changes through repetition, not through a quick challenge. So if you want to detox, don't think of it as getting rid of dopamine. Think of it as changing the environment that keeps hijacking your dopamine system over and over. Your brain was shaped for a world where rewards were rare and effort was normal. Now you live in a reality where sugar, novelty, instant entertainment, and social feedback are only a few taps away. Protecting your reward system doesn't mean you must avoid all pleasure. It means you decide which kinds of rewards you want your brain to treat as ordinary and which ones you want to keep as occasional extras, not constant background noise. A powerful way to do this is by making effort-based rewards the backbone of your day. Movement, deep work, practicing a skill, learning something challenging, building relationships, and spending time outdoors all recruit dopamine, but in a steadier way. When you consistently pair dopamine with actions that require patience and energy, your brain starts to see challenge itself as meaningful, not just quick comfort and easy distraction. You can also add small bits of friction to the habits that overwhelm your reward system. That could be turning off non-essential notifications, keeping certain apps off your home screen, not storing highly processed snacks within easy reach, or setting clear time windows for entertainment instead of letting it leak into every free moment. You do not need a perfect life. You just need your environment arranged so that it is easier for your brain to move toward what really matters and a little harder to slide into endless low-value stimulation. Dopamine is the reason you can chase goals, learn from your experiences, and feel that spark of "this is worth it." The problem is not dopamine itself. The problem is when an environment packed with instant, exaggerated rewards trains your brain to crave things that do not actually leave you fulfilled. Once you understand that dopamine is a teaching signal, something important clicks. Every single day, you are showing your brain what to want more of. Using dopamine wisely starts with a simple question: what do I want my brain to find rewarding in the future? If you keep pairing dopamine with distraction, your brain will become excellent at seeking distraction. If you keep pairing dopamine with sleep, health, deep work, real connection, and long-term projects, your brain will slowly get better at moving in that direction. Temptations will still exist, but they will not run the whole show. You do not need to kill your dopamine system or fear it. You only need to stop letting cheap, constant stimulation decide how your brain is wired. When you choose your inputs with more intention, you are no longer just a passenger inside a restless reward system. You start to act more like the driver. If this video helped you see your own brain a little differently, take a second to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who always says they feel addicted but never really understood what is happening inside their mind.